Welcome back, fishing fam. The Wacky rig has been a staple amongst bass anglers since it was discovered in South Texas. This technique has been branched out in many ways, but today I'm going to bring you back to the essentials of a Wacky rig. The first set of essentials here is the equipment essentials. Let's start off with our rod setup. First of all, when I think Wacky rig, I think spinning rod, and the spinning rod that I think works best is a medium power rod with a fast action tip. As far as the reel goes, a 2500 or 3000 series reel will work just fine. I like on all my spinning reels to use braid to a leader, and I use braid in this instance to prevent that line twist. As far as leader goes, I usually use a 10-pound test, either fluorocarbon or monofilament line. Either one works fine, and I use about 10 to 12 feet of it. Overall, in my experience, hooks don't really matter. They don't make a whole lot of difference on the Wacky rig, but there are a couple characteristics that I like to pay attention to. First of all, light wire versus heavy wire. If I'm using a light wire hook, I'm almost always gonna have a ring on there, otherwise it's easy for that hook to pull through the Senko. Otherwise, if I'm using a heavy wire gauged hook, I may not do that. Two other characteristics I care about: does it have a weed guard? Am I fishing around weeds or vegetation that I get hung up in? And does it have a weight? Am I needing a weight to get down deeper to be more efficient with my fishing? Now, which bait should you use? Well, most of the time, I like to find a heavily salted Senko bait. The obviously heavy salt allows the bait to fall through the water. If it has less salt, you may want to use a weighted hook. However, I find the heavy salt ones work very well, like the Gary Yamamoto's, but those can kind of be expensive. So I like to use these Guggen Lunker logs. But those aren't the only kind of baits that you can use. I like to use straight tail worms from time to time. I have this plasma tail that I like to Wacky rig from time to time. It makes a even wackier rig. And then these smaller robo worms if I'm looking to be a little bit more finesse with my Wacky rig. Throughout the years, there have been many different ways people have come up with on how to fish the Wacky rig, but getting back to the essential magic that this bait has, it has to be the fall. The fall has a unique action, just like this, coming down through the water column. So we want to maximize that fall action. So you want to cast it out there in a certain depth of water where you have enough time for the Wacky rig to do its action through the water column. And then once it hits the bottom, you want to lift the tip of your rod up and then let it fall right back down. It's just a cyclical motion, and that is one of the best ways that I've found to fish the Wacky rig. The other way that I like to fish the Wacky rig is almost like a sub topwater deal, where you're maximizing the wackiness as well, where you're fishing it a foot to 6 inches below the water top, and you're just pulling it through the water, and it's having that wacky action as you come through the water. This requires either a slow reel or you're making that action happen with your rod tip. This is a very topwater type technique, and I like to use it because the bite is usually very visible. So for me, there are 3 main places I like to fish the Wacky rig. The first is underneath docks. This bait skips pretty well, therefore it makes it really effective underneath docks. So the second place I like to fish this is around riprap. We have a steep bank, which allows us to maximize the fall action that we get out of a Wacky rig. Also, it's worth noting that a Wacky rig does not get hung up in the rocks nearly as much as a crankbait. And the third place I like to fish this guy is around weed edges. Weed edges hold lots of bluegill, therefore they're going to hold lots of bass. And fishing this with a weed guard around those weed edges will get you several bites on the Wacky rig. I like to pick up the Wacky rig during the post-spawn and during the summer. I find those 2 times of the year most effective. As far as water conditions where I'm more likely to pick this up, and that is slick, calm conditions when the bite gets a little tougher than when there's a little breeze. I'll pick it up during that time, and I find that I get more bites than I would any other technique. So the Wacky Rig is very good at getting bites when the bite is tough. But have you ever thought about using the Neko Rig? Right here I have 3 tips to make your Neko rigs more effective, so check that out. But until next time, see you later, fishing fam.